Wait, which scene?
The one with the Klingons at dinner. I didn't really like it.
Yeah, I don't understand. Why not?
Because I found it... disturbing.
So we find out that the final frontier isn't final as we explore the undiscovered country with Star Trek VI from 1991. This film, in my opinion, is most like, in tone anyway, Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. It's a little darker, a little edgier. Nicholas Meyer, who directed Star Trek II, comes back and directs Star Trek VI, so it makes some sense that it has the same kind of feel, although it's a very, very different kind of story. To me, this is, the bigger picture, it's a conspiracy film, but at the heart of it is a murder mystery. And even the music, as you watch it, the music is murder mystery music.
But I liked it.
I did too. And so for me, we talked about this before when we were looking at the other films. Star Trek II, like the television series, each of the films has sort of been a different sort of genre, like they used to do in the original series. So Star Trek II was sort of like Balance of Terror or Arena, because it had sort of that kind of feel to it. Star Trek III, because it sort of explored Vulcan culture, was more like Amok Time, or maybe even Journey to Babel in some ways. Star Trek IV sort of combined elements of City on the Edge of Forever and The Trouble with Tribbles. It was a little bit comedic, and it was a time travel episode. Star Trek V really didn't necessarily have a firm grasp on what it wanted to be. Now we get to Star Trek VI, and this one plays more like a murder mystery where they're unraveling something. So it's sort of like A Wolf in the Fold, or maybe Conscience of the King. And as such, it works. It works in its own genre, but it works as part of the bigger story that they were trying to work with for the original series cast. Now, at the time, the plot was more of, was pulled right out of the headlines, because the United States and the Soviet Union were kind of entering this uneasy alliance. And this was mirrored in the film by the Federation and the Klingon Empire being thrown together in that way. So for me, it was like a current event. For you, that's ancient history, and history you really haven't studied yet. So did it work?
It still worked, and I think that's just one of the many reasons why this is a good film. Because if you were watching this at that time, it would make sense. But if that's history for you and you're watching this, then it still makes sense.
Well, that's good. That means, it's a well-written script if it still stands up, because, we're no longer dealing with an analogous situation happening right now. Character-wise, how did you think this went?
I really liked this. Klingons, I thought, were really good, except for one part at the dinner. I even thought that they were being a little bit mean to Captain Kirk, especially Chang.
Well, I think that's part of the plot, because Chang is kind of Kirk's counterpart in the Klingon Empire. Kirk isn't really in favor of this alliance, neither is Chang. They're both from an older generation. They don't trust the other, and they're both they're warriors. That's what they've done. They've captained ships and they've fought each other. Maybe not directly, but they've Chang has fought the Federation, and Kirk has obviously fought the Klingons through the years, and they're the same. So there was a lot of hidden meaning to a lot of what they were saying at that dinner. There was a lot of underlying themes there for them. So I understand where you're coming from, but you weren't supposed to like them, so it worked in that respect.
I did like the girl Vulcan that was in there.
Valeris.
Yes. I knew it started with V. Valeris, I thought she was at weird spots, and I was a little suspicious of her.
Now, it's interesting you say that because the first time I saw the film, I wasn't suspicious of her. I took her at face value, but you are correct. She shows up at very strange times in the movie, and that's the murder mystery piece. She's in the doorway when Kirk is recording his personal log, which ultimately gets him in trouble. I just took it as coincidence that she happened to be there. Of course, that's how he figures out she's in on the conspiracy, because his personal log is used against him during the trial. Also, if you remember, there's those two crew members when the Klingons beam aboard, or they're in the transporter room rather. They're the two crew members who are talking derogatorily about the Klingons. They're making fun of the Klingons. And Valeris shows up and she says, "Do you crewmen have something to do?" And they say, "Yes, ma'am." And she says, "Well, snap to it." I thought she was disciplining the crew members the first time I saw it.
Yeah.
But in reality, those are the two crew members that assassinate the Chancellor. So she took in that information at that point, and then she basically recruited them because she knew that they didn't like Klingons. So she probably recruited them to assassinate the Chancellor. So it really works on a level where she's in those places, and you can see it in two very different ways.
Right.
Why she's there, right? When you're
But
watching
I didn't notice that those two were actually the two that did that until you just said it. I've noticed some other things, but not that.
Right, that's a staple of a murder mystery, is that ambiguity. When you finally find out who's behind the whole thing, you look back at scenes and go, "Oh, that's what I thought they were doing this, but they were really doing that." So they work that in, and they work that in rather nicely. You know, that's done well. Now, Kim Cattrall plays Valeris, and interestingly, she was the original choice for Saavik back in Star Trek II. She was unable to do the part at the time, so it went to Kirstie Alley. Then, of course, Kirstie Alley did not come back for Star Trek 3 and 4, and Robin Curtis took the part. And they really wanted Kirstie Alley to come back and play Saavik in that role. It wasn't going to be Valeris, it was supposed to be Saavik in Star Trek 6. She wouldn't come back, so they rewrote the part and made it a completely different character, and that enticed Kim Cattrall to come out and take the part, because she did not want it if it was going to be Saavik, because she didn't want to be the third actress to play the same role. So, you know, and I think she does a really good job here, because I didn't see it coming the first time I saw the film. Of course, now when I watched it, I know, so I see it differently, but I see where you're coming from.
I think that Captain Kirk, Dr. McCoy, and Mr. Spock were all really good in this one.
I agree.
Definitely liked how Mr. Spock stayed on the ship while Captain Kirk and Dr. McCoy went down.
Right, so Kirk and McCoy beam over and try to save the Chancellor. They're unable to do so, and then they're arrested. And they're charged with his murder and ultimately found guilty, and they're sentenced to the Klingon prison planet, Aurora Pente. Meanwhile, Spock is on the ship, and he's trying to unravel the direct mystery of who really fired, who killed the Chancellor. They're looking for the magnetic boots. So we finally get to see Spock be the captain of the Enterprise.
Right.
He's a captain. He's been the captain, but he's been serving under Kirk. So you have two captains on the ship. He's serving as, and I know that's because they're friends and because it puts the crew together. But we really never got a chance to see him be, you know, he was captain in Star Trek 2, but he gives command of the ship over to Admiral Kirk at the time. We never get to see him actually be the captain of the ship until here, which was nice.
Yes.
And it also allowed Kirk and McCoy to go down to the planet, and they had a nice interaction. We get to see their friendship without the third person in the triangle there, and it was a different way to kind of look at that. So that was kind of fun too.
Yeah.
They had some really, you know, McCoy was very funny, especially on the planet when Kirk is working with the alien,
Yes.
and she's there, and you know, McCoy had some great
like
one-liners.
the alien either.
Well, that was new technology at the time. Her ability to morph, that
Right.
was a new thing, and so they used that was kind of state-of-the-art special effects at the time. We take it for granted now because we see stuff like that all the time, but that was one of the first times in the films where we saw a character morph into another kind of a character. So that was pretty neat. I thought the secondary characters were much better served in this film. Scotty and Uhura, where I thought their characters were somewhat not well served in Star Trek V.
Right.
Especially Scotty, who was given a lot of slapstick comedy, in Star Trek V. I thought both of their characters were more true to who they had been and who they had become in this film. And Uhura even comes up with the idea for the torpedo that ultimately defeats the bird of prey. And Scotty, of course, does all the things where he's saving the ship and doing different things. They were much better served in this film. Sulu, who was just, window dressing in Star Trek V, he gets a great role here. His screen time, he doesn't have as much screen time, but it's quality screen time, especially when he shows up at Kittimer and he gets some great lines there and some great scenes. So I think he's better served. And Chekhov, he's been served pretty well throughout the course of the films, and he gets an equal share here. So I thought they were all, looked at. I thought they were better, treated in this film.
Yes. I definitely like Scotty. I think that if Mr. Spock hadn't been the kind of captain of the ship at that time, then I definitely think Scotty would have been.
Right, and in the old series, that's how the command structure worked. It was Kirk was first in command, obviously, then Spock, then Scotty always took control of the ship. And, you've got a lot of different command level characters there now because Chekhov was the first officer on the Reliant. Sulu has left and he's a captain. So I mean, these crew members have been around for a while, and they've worked very cleverly to try to keep them together as a crew on the Enterprise because, of course, their careers would have taken them in different directions by this point. So Scotty, he got to be the Scotty we know. And not that I didn't think he was funny in Star Trek V. I just don't like humor at his expense. So he got to be funny in the way that Scotty is funny here when he was delivering humorous lines. So overall, did you like this story?
Yes, I did. I think that it all made sense, whereas Star Trek V was a little bit confusing for me. And I really liked it. I liked all of the characters, just that one part at the dinner with the Klingons.
Right. Well, I think this was a great way to finish out the voyages of the original cast. After Star Trek V was a little bit of a letdown, this one kind of brought things back home and let them finish out in a way that I think they were all probably proud of the product when it was done and over with. And they even got to sign off at the end, which is really cool. I'd never seen that done in a film before, and I don't think I've ever seen it done since, where they actually used their signatures as their credit in the end credits. And so that was pretty cool. They actually literally got to sign off. So it was pretty fun.
Yeah.
I think, all the characters were treated well here. The storyline was good. There's a director's cut of it where there's a little bit different twist to the ending, because when the Klingon... There's a scene that's not there, and Rene Auberjonois, who actually was in Deep Space Nine as a different character, there's a scene that's missing from the movie that they took out where he's trying to present a plan where they're going to go in and rescue Kirk and McCoy. And they're presenting that to the Federation president, and he doesn't let him do it. But ultimately, when Scotty goes up and he takes out the assassin who's going to shoot the Federation president, and it's a Klingon, and the Klingon falls, through the window, and he's on the floor and he dies. You saw the one character lean over him, and they cut it right there. The edit is right there. But if that had continued another frame, you see him lift a mask, and it's Rene Auberjonois, who was the one that was presenting the thing. So he's actually a Federation officer dressed as a Klingon. And he was the one that was going to shoot the Federation president. And that was, again, to, kind of cause the alliance to fall apart. And so it's a different level to it. And I'm not sure which way I like it better, but we watched the theatrical cut because that's what we've been watching all along.
Yes.
So, all right, last take.
See it.
Yep, definitely a see it here. It still stands up through all these years. And it was a great way for the original cast. It was a nice final voyage for the original cast, I guess.